Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Alongside me, I have the young 20-something, almost old enough to drink, Professor Pixel with me. We, of course, are covering The Prisoner, going episode by episode. And after finishing up Twin Peaks and Haven and a bunch of other TV shows on this episodic guide here, I have to say, as Professor Pixel, diving deep in The Prisoner, one of the best TV shows of all time to me. We've talked a little bit about some themes that have come up and some of the characters. And here we are in episode 3, called simply A, B, and C. And at first I thought, okay, is this a bit of a joke from the writer on how this went through? But I got to tell you, as we mentioned in the first 2 episodes with some of the things that got set up, I was waiting for a heavily drug-induced torture episode, and we got it here. So I'm pretty happy about it. I think this is a pretty interesting concept. I think it played out pretty well. I don't think they overshot anything here. And again, like the first episode, it's pretty serious, not a lot of humor in this. This is kind of a fun, trippy episode, and overall, I think it's still a solid one. Yet to have a bad one or a mediocre one so far. What's your initial take on this episode?
Yeah, well, I wasn't sure what to exactly expect. And this, I think, is the most, uh, well, science fiction-y the show has been. It's really delved into it with this one, and I really do kind of like that. But with how this starts, we're introduced instantly to a new number 2. It's still a little jarring going through the beginning all over again and having it mesh with a new number 2 telling him, oh, well, we'll be watching you. But here we start out with one who is kind of wimpy, because he gets a call from his higher-ups. Apparently, he's been at this job a while trying to break number 6. And they basically tell him, you get the information or you're done. So number 2 calls a woman, I believe number 16?
14.
Something like that. 14, number 14, and tells her to get the machine ready. They're going to use her experiment. So as soon as she comes in, we see, this is the first that we actually see number 2 in a new state when it comes to this episode, because before it was just the intro. But we see number 6. They put him on a table. He's knocked out. And we're quickly introduced to what's going on. He's in this dream state, and they have a machine that they can connect to him, and it detects his thoughts and then translates them into images that they can see and manipulate. So in this dreamlike state, they go ahead and set up a party hosted by Madam, I'm not sure what her name was, but apparently a bunch of spies go to this party.
You know what her name was, don't you? Engadine.
Oh my god.
I'm dead serious.
Madam Englantine.
No, Engantine.
Yes.
No
yes.
L.
I was kidding.
Oh, okay.
But they basically have this whole party set up, and he, number 2, introduces a few dossiers of people that he wants to introduce number 6 to at this party to try to get the answer as to why he defected. And I'm just going to go ahead and take a moment to pause there, but
yep.
You should know that I love this kind of shit.
It's not time travel per se, but it's psychology in that he's drugged in. And I'm gonna back up here at the beginning. Obviously, at the beginning, we're familiar now with the fact that he'd been drugged and gassed in his own place and brought here to the village to, of course, have some people try to figure out the important information in his brain, which whoever number 2 is that seems to be in charge, we don't know who number 1 is, wants to know why did he resign. We're not led to believe at this particular point that there might be other information that they deem valuable. However, in this particular case, we've seen where we've had a couple of number 2s, because this number 2 is the 3rd one that we've had. And he's a pencil neck geek um, which is, you know, a -2 in my book, but then it's a +1 because he's rocking a turtleneck. But he's skeevy looking, so +1 for the turtleneck, but -3 for everything else. But it's different because he's playing number 2 in a totally different way than the other previous 2 versions of number 2 that we had. And the other point we made with the last week's episode, episode 2, is that the order that these were presented in Britain were not the same order here in the States. So in the last episode, it was mentioned how it seemed like a lot of time had been passing and that number 6 had been working himself into being, you know, part of the village, and he walks around a lot. In this episode here, number 2, he's annoying because he's such a wuss ass. And to contrast that, the thing that stuck out to me really, really quick is, you know, again, within a couple minutes after the theme, we get the new number 2. You know, we get a phone, the mysterious phone call, and the J-hook looking red artsy fartsy phone thingy. It looks like a block of red wood. And they shoot this with his face in there with the dramatic music every time something bad happens to number 2, which I think is funny. But I'm struck by how the lady that we meet, the doctor, is introduced in here because we've talked about not trusting women in this episode, especially from the detective, the old detective thing. If she was blonde, she was going to be bad news. She was going to be involved in a killing or whatever like that. This goes back to like Philip Marlowe days and stuff here in American cinema. But on British TV, we've already seen in the last episode where he was befriending, I believe it was number 8, who turned out to be a double agent, if you will, maybe even a triple agent. We're not sure. And so he can't believe her. But here, they're coming in from the rain. You see this corpse on a table wrapped in a bag. And then she basically yells at the people bringing him, and they got their galoshes and their rain gear on. She's like, "Stop, don't bring the wet in here. Take your shoes off." And I'm like, okay, this woman is exerting a bit of power, and it contrasts to number two's wimpiness. And it's not that he's wimpy, it's just that he's desperate. He's really got to get an answer because his ass is on a line and it might mean death. We're not sure, but we believe that they're very serious. So I thought it was an interesting scene here as they're setting this up because we don't know it's number 6 immediately, but the guys take their boots off and then they walk in there and they pull it back and like, yep, they can drug you in the middle of your sleep. You're not even going to know about it. And they can see everything. And it doesn't seem like there's any limits to how far their reach is as far as tracking you. And I like that paranoia aspect. But the whole setup here, either it's ridiculous, I think, to believe in it and watch it, but the way it's presented here, it's so simple. I don't think it's over the top. You know, basically, he's number 2's got a week to get number 6 to divulge information of why he resigned. And fundamentally, this new number 2 is taking a different approach. He's basically thinking that he was like on the take. He was going to sell his information. And so when you have a hypothesis, you don't prove a hypothesis right in science. You try to prove it wrong. If you can't, every other scientist tries to prove it wrong. And if nobody can prove it wrong and you can reproduce the experiment and keep getting the same results, you accept that for what it is until something comes along, new technology or new point of view, new experiment, things like that that might modify it. That's the scientific method. So his initial take, we know what it is. We're going to see how it's going to work. We quickly get the stuff. And I think that's great. I think a lot of times here in American television, especially with science fiction, you do not get that. And here we get it. So either this dude's right and somehow he's going to force it out here with the help of this lady he's pressuring. And again, very communist kind of tactic, the way this is flowing down. But again, it's weird because he's in charge, but he's the wimpy one. She's not in charge. She knows it might mean her ass too, but she's not trying to necessarily save number 6. She's telling him, hey, we can only do this once a day because the serum is so strong, the 3 doses, one with each A, B, and C, that, you know, it could kill him. And he's like, I'll take responsibility for that. She's like, okay. But yeah, it's almost preposterous enough because they just have him laying there with a stupid contraption on his head like he's asleep, and she fiddles with some knobs. She turns some stuff on the oscilloscope to see a signal, and we're supposed to believe this is doing something. But the information on the screen being presented as his dreams, we're sucked in immediately. So again, 5-10 minutes in, boom, this is moving fast. You said that about episode 1, and I've got to totally agree. This thing is very fast paced. I'm not saying it's hyperactive in terms of the camera work that's switching, but with what's going on. And by the time she injects him with some drug, at first I went, well, wait a minute. When he's bitching at her and she turns the way it's shot and she goes to inject the drug in him, we don't really see the drug getting put into his wrist. So did she or not? because there's a brief moment where number 6 almost seemed like he was coming to and looked at her and almost recognized her and kind of conked out. And she had a look of like, I don't know, being forlorn on her face or something like that. She's like, not like she was falling in love with him, but like she knew of him, like he wasn't just another subject. So it's hard to explain because she's got that German kind of, I'm straight laced going right at it sort of thing. I really don't know. And it's, 60s technology with big tubes and wires and stuff, not like it would be today, but we get the concept and that's all we need. But you're right. We see him going to this party. It's what's set up, and the party's in Paris. So we're watching his dreams play out. And the idea is that somehow, and there's a great camera shot following him from the back as he's walking around, being super classy to everybody. This is a side of acting we have not seen from him yet, unless you watch Danger Man, you're familiar with him and being capable of doing it. This is really, really good because again, you're at a party. It's a good stuff. He has to be charming. He's got to be James Bond. That's not the James Bond we know. Actually, he turned down James Bond too, by the way. Um, it's a whodunit in a way, isn't it? So it's a science fiction thing, but immediately turns into a detective thing, which people at these party that's playing in his dreams is going to turn on him. We've got 3 shots at it supposedly, and there's several moments here where they just don't rush it. They set it up with him not flirting, but just having a wry sense of humor, being quick-witted, everything you would want in a super spy. And you're like, okay, this guy's so cool. But he does meet, let's just call it person A, and they have some witty banter about stuff and selling information, and it's not too over the top. So we're watching, and of course it's going to fail. We know we're going to have to go through all 3 of them. That's just the way it's written too. But this is some quick, sharp, witty stuff, and by the time he's kind of over talking with them, he goes to leave, and they figure out a way that they can kind of manipulate the dream a little bit. And they sort of try to explain it. And they have A standing right outside the door, and the 2 old school lackeys dressed up in full old British regalia kind of kidnap him. And so we don't know what's supposed to happen. And he gets driven to a state. And we have one of our first of many knuckle sandwiches served up in this episode with lots of British fighting and people just getting knocked around. And of course, after the last one, he does the straight Bond kind of thing where he straightens his little bow tie and says, "Be seeing you." And this is all before the second dose. So we've got action, we got the sci-fi. I don't know if there's a romance thing in here with a doctor lady. But damn, it's pretty good. And we're about a third of the way in here. So let me pause here because I know you'll like to continue, because the way it draws from going to dose 1 to dose 2, the dissolve shot is of the phone ringing, and it's that curvy red J-hook phone, and they show it kind of at this funky angle with the guy looking at it. I'm like, this is a pretty artsy episode. I'm digging it so far. What's your take on anything theme-wise that's come up?
Well, honestly, I kind of want to pivot because after the first dose it's one of my favorite parts when he, number 6, wakes up and he realizes, what the hell has happened to me? And he looks at his arm and he notices a mark because that's where the injection was. And he is starting to realize that something's manipulating him in his sleep. So he goes ahead and he starts to try to investigate a little bit, but he doesn't really have anywhere to really lean into until after the second dose. And the second dose is actually one of my favorites because it introduces a woman that he apparently knew. And it's at that point in time where he's starting to catch on, even within the dream, a little bit, because this woman isn't herself. And I love that number 14 is able to just whisper into a microphone and, oh yeah, I'm definitely B. Don't worry.
Did you notice at the end of dosage 1 and dissolving into the second dose, where he gets up and his back's a little tight or whatever, perhaps the effect of drugs, and like you said, he realizes he had been drugged, how he's going to respond to it. And remember, his home here in the village is designed, the layout, just like his flat in London. So when he's coming out of the room, and actually it just occurred to me in this episode for the very first time, it's a very minimalist design, even by 60 standards. Not a lot of crazy funky colors, that sort of thing. Very sparse. when he's walking out of his bedroom and he's stretching or whatever, and he's doing his morning routine, you can clearly see two things that I thought were prevalent. One, which again, these are set pieces, so they're cheap. So I don't know if it was just production thing that slipped through or if it was intentional in terms of filming an episode. You clearly see a set of footsteps walking towards his bed. So I don't know if that was supposed to be him in his slippers in the evening or people coming to drag his, drugged body away, which is what happened, right? But the other thing too is it's not a traditional door he's walking through. It's basically a wall with a big hole in it that is acting as a giant doorway, right? But when I'm looking at it, I'm going, maybe they're being artsy. Maybe because it's the prison, I'm reading too much in it. But it looks like an omega symbol if you just trace the outline of it. If you look at the negative space that way, and you talk about the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end, the aurora boreas, the snake eating its tail off or whatever. I'm like, I don't know if this means anything to it at all, because this doesn't strike me as a particularly religious show at this point. But before they get to the second dose, I wanted you to comment on what happens when he opens the door before the second dose is injected. So let me pause there, and just because there's something there that happened, I don't know if you were going to mention it or not. I think it's pivotal to the episode.
I'm trying to remember exactly what you're talking about.
He gets up, he walks to the front door, he opens it, and remember the lady that drove him around in the taxi, the local taxi only. She's Asian.
Yes.
It appears. She's at a booth right in front of his flat selling flowers to a number 14 who happens to just be there at the right time. He's getting up and they have a crash zoom on him. Yes. I'm like, why are they doing that? So I thought I don't know if there'll be more to her, but she turned out to be the character that struck me the most in this episode. And maybe it'll be a nothing burger. I don't know. But I'm paranoid, so I'm babbling. Let me pause and let you finish.
No, you're absolutely right. With number 14, she is a true adversary to number 6 in this episode. And I don't think she really wants to be, but in being forced to do that, she is slightly more diabolical than number 2, because number 2 just wants answers. He's just afraid. He's kind of pathetic. I believe that 14, though, she absolutely wants this experiment to succeed. She absolutely wants to see the answer. She wants to make sure that it's all tip-top and going through. I mean, it's her baby, her project. And to see it being used by this, it's a little bothersome to her, I imagine, but she is also, as a scientist, interested. But it's actually after the second night when he meets B, and B is pretty much dragged off by hostile witnesses. We see him become suspicious, and these are people that number 6 knew. So at a certain point, when he suspects it's not actually her, and he asks, okay, what's the name of your husband? And they quickly check the file, and they spout out a name. Okay, he's okay with that. He nods as she has a gun to her head from a random henchman. He asks, what's her son's name? Should be easy enough. And they don't have an answer. It's not in the file. It's unknown to them, and thus number 6 just walks away. And it's during day 2 that he actually gets, wise to it. And with second injection, one more, it could kill him. He follows number 14 for a good part of the day, and eventually is led to where the laboratory is. So he sneaks into the lab, looks around at the equipment, and I was a little worried here because I get paranoid too that this could also be a dream, but sure enough, it doesn't seem that way, as he is able to take the vial and he dilutes the treatment. And then he goes ahead, he sneaks away, and we actually get to see number 2 say, "Where is he?" And he shows up on the camera, and he's just complaining about him at this point. Why is he always walking? Why? And he goes home, and after that first day, he drank tea and was drugged. And so today, as he has tea waiting for him when he gets home, he goes ahead, he just tosses it and he drinks some tap water. But sure enough, they're there too, because he falls out. So they are putting chemicals in his water. But that prepares us for the final night, and I'll go ahead and pause there.
Yeah, so one of the things I mentioned about this show is it was supposed to not be as long as it is episode wise, but it was extended to kind of be available for overseas markets. That's one way of making money back in the 60s with TV shows. And I mean, it's still a thing today, but um, so there may be some episodes that are just kind of like fodder that we're like, whatever. But what struck me about number 14 when she's out there buying the flowers, usually a man buys a woman flowers if he's wooing her. And typically red roses indicate love versus other colors in her meanings. And I think she's buying pink ones. And again, I might be reading too much into it, but it was interesting to see the taxi cab driver because she's playing different roles. So will we see her later? Can we trust her? And with 14, she looks like you said, like maybe she's thinking of this as her experiment. So it's her baby, literally, that she wants to take control of her. And I don't know if she's German, but she has a German countenance to her demeanor that makes me think of it, minus an accent. So I could just go, well, it's 1967. German scientists, as we talked about before, fled to other places, particularly in the United States, and were places in a lot of government institutions for their knowledge about activities and their scientific acumen. And why would that not be the case here in the village, where allegedly it's filled by people that might be betraying you? And, who's to say there's not multiple villages of this concept? So it's kind of a grand epic thing here, but just that look in that crash zoom, I'm like, this is intriguing to me because he does go to follow her in the morning. And where is she sitting? She's sitting at appears to be in the exact same place as the older admiral that he plays chess with over there near the old folks home overlooking where the boat is at too. It's just from a different way. And yes, these are set pieces, so it's not exactly the village. The film shots were there, and then they recreated it here at home, but it still makes you feel like you're there. And she mentions that we all make mistakes, and this thing as they have a conversation because he wants to know, well, how can you tell if you're in a dream and how you can control that sort of thing. So he's basically directly letting her know that I'm on to you guys. And that's one of the things about this episode that I don't know if it was good or bad. And it was a similar thing he did in the last episode. In the last episode, he walked right up to him and told him, I will not be counted index brief, blah, blah, blah. I'm a free man, basically. Screw you. But I'll go ahead and do the arts and crafts thing, and I'll show you. He's got a bit of an ego to him. And I get it. And he's being calculating, but there's a sense of bravado to me in him that I just got, I wonder if this is going to get him in trouble in a future episode. Because it's like, well, if you already kind of sort of know what's going on and suspect it after one dose and there's two more, with the knowledge you have now, would you just be quiet about it and try to work your way through it? What purpose does it serve to push her into knowing that? It turns out to be effective for reasons I'll get into later, but it was just nice little back and forth. There's a little bit of a dramatic pause before we see number 2 getting beat up well. But he walks into 2's office and basically says that too. And 2 tries to put on a good front, but we know it's not like that. And what makes him a wuss? And look, milk drinkers, we all love me some good vitamin D milk, right? Chocolate, whatever you like. This guy drinks milk to calm himself with the idea that makes him nervous. I don't know if that's British humor, but it's not tea and strumpets. It's not a cucumber sandwich. It's not anything remotely cultural. And I'm like, I didn't get that. Maybe it's supposed to be a wholesome thing. I don't know. It's, he's like, milk is a perfect food. It creates good temper. And I'm like, kill this number 2 already. This is by far the worst character so far out of everyone we've met, including all the number 2s. I just don't like him, but he gets the phone call from the Red J Hook, and he's like, yes, sir, I realize my future's at stake. In 2 days, I guarantee we'll have results. And what disappointed me in this next scene, even though it's running on, is number 6 is getting ready for bed. and his maid, I guess, or maybe it's just a maid. Everybody has maids now. I don't recall seeing one. She's making his tea, which he drinks. It's like, bro, you're a spy. You know better, because as soon as he takes a sip, he passes out. You're like, boy, you're dumb. Why would you trust anybody serving you anything, right? You're in Mexico, bottled water, bro. But it gives us an excuse to go back to this Parisian party where he's all dressed nice and dapper, where she comes out and she says all the cute things that an older seasoned woman of high society would about, men aren't trustworthy and I have a collection of them and I'm jealous and all that stuff too. But we get the concept that number 14 and number 2 don't have to just be passive players in this by watching what happens in his dreams, because if in his dream he tells somebody in there what happened, that's what number 2 believes would be the truth in current reality. So we hear that from the doctor, she thinks he's resisting and all that too. And again, to your point, this is where they think they could say something. It's a super hot French maid that comes up to deliver a note to her, to the madame, who gives it to him. And he has a rendezvous in the arbor, which is the old English word of basically saying the maze of flowers or whatever you want to call it. So he goes in there and meets this what's the chick from Austin Powers? Scott, number 6. This woman reminds me of her too. She looks like it, and he's very, again, elegant with here, but he's letting her know about, hey, let's used to be a good dancer. Let's dance. And then they try to play puppeteers or whatever because he's not giving anything up. And he's on to her in the dream. I'm like, damn, this guy's good mentally. How is he like that? And she panics and these people appear. And again, it's supposed to be in a dream, but he's not going to divulge anything. So you're like, okay. And then you know what happens? We get another serving of karate chops, knuckle sandwiches, and occasional judo throw. It's really good stuff for especially for 60s action. It was entertaining because he's very dapper about it, and it's quick too. It's not that sped up crap. They take it as far as they can before he wakes up, and when he wakes up again, he feels completely hungover. He looks at his wrist; he's got a second notch. Starts following, to your point, number 14 around, and we go through some of the back ways and there's some of the camera work, and it's a really horrible set when you think about it, but just the way I've always said before, British people film these little bits, you still feel like you're there because it's effective. You're not distracted by tons of other stuff, or the fact that in super ultra HD today you have directors want to have this magnificent shot and the person's nothing. No, these are mostly full body shots with what would be day television stuff there too, but it's that secret spy stuff. And as guys, we get craziness. He goes down into the air shaft because he can't go through the front door. It conveniently finds a way to break into the facility where it turns out he's being drugged, and he's looking at stuff around. She's in there doing stuff. She leaves. He breaks in there. This is the same hallway we saw in Broaden. This is the same hallway in the doctor's office where we saw people undergoing, whether it's electroshock therapy or some other type of gibberish that they're spewing in a room with really funky lights. Maybe that's just a 60s psychedelic British thing going on. But again, some questions here. He finds that there's a third dose. He's looking at the equipment. He surmises what the experiment is. And instead of destroying it or doing something like that, he decides that he's going to just dilute the serum. And he realizes that what's been going on by looking at dossier A and B, and then eventually see that, as after putting everything back into place, that, okay, I'll just dilute this with what I'm assuming is probably just saline. I'm thinking, all right, that might make it a bit of a weaker solution. Maybe he'll be able to resist a bit more. And like a good proper Englishman, in his jacket, he's got a handkerchief in it, a hanky for the Americans, that he puts all stuff in there and puts it back into place. And all right, whatever, we're buying it. And then we get wuss ass number 2, a scene cut to him where he's in his gown, waking up with messy hair, wanting his more milk because he doesn't figuring out how to do it. And he's bitching and whining and complaining about number 6. He's irritating. All he does is walk. He never gets tired. And we're seeing him watch number 6 on the big screen going back. And so I'm going, wait a minute. Do they not have cameras on the outside of, their private facilities? It just doesn't make sense to me. And it is a neat shot where when number 6 is walking back and number 2's watching him, where he turns around to the rotating statues that have the cameras on him, and he knows, and he just does the "be seeing you" gesture at him. That's pretty cool. Well, what's stupid as we get set up here for the third dose is he's back at home after his hard day of spy work. He takes the coffee over to his sink, dumps it out, and he thinks he's smart.
Tea.
Gets the tap. Excuse me, tea. I apologize. You're absolutely right. And decides I'll just have a sip of the old regular water. And of course he gets knocked out. I'm like, are you that dumb, bro? But I mean, obviously they've got eyes and ears everywhere, allegedly. He seems pleased with himself when he looks through the water, but if water's got drugs in it, you're not going to tell. Not unless there's like a worm in it, then you think it's tequila. But I thought this is where his arrogance, might come into play or something. But he does a lot of heavy sweating in these episodes as he's laying down. He doesn't have to act much, but they put on the fake sweat really good. And yeah, and since you're such a big fan of these scenes, I'm going to hand it over to you to describe the third and final scene as we finish up this episode.
Well, I mean, it's. I thought it was brilliant with number 2 being just squirming whenever he looks back to the statues and he says, "Be seeing you," and number 2's like, no, number 6, I'll be seeing you. It's absolutely different. I have to agree, but I am still able to enjoy it. But when it comes to this final night, the final dossier is on C. But the true identity to who C is absolutely unknown to number 2. So as they have him hooked up in the machine, he goes ahead and he puts this small little tape connected to the machine. And finally, it seems that it's time. And it's actually Madam Engadine, I guess.
Engadine.
Yes. It's her. She's
a cougar, by the way, in case anybody needs that question answered. She's definitely a cougar.
Oh yeah. She was giving him the once over a couple times. But no, she is there and reveals that, well, she can take him to her superior, and then it'll be done. And it seems that number 2 is going to get his answer. He's watching. He's excited. He wasn't expecting this. And it actually takes them outside of the party. And it's kind of a poor set with it, where it's the car with the screen in the back like they're driving, but they're actually not.
Oh yeah.
But ultimately they get to this one area and the doors open up and it's like a small alleyway. And he goes down and says to D that number 2 has dubbed him, that, okay, well, if you want this information, if you want what I have to give you, you need to reveal yourself right now. And D is not having it. And ultimately, we get to see number 6 walk up and force him to reveal himself. Just goes ahead, turns around, takes off the mask, and we obviously know who it is. It's number 2. We can tell through that thin black cloth, the glasses, the outline of the glasses right there. But it is, in fact, number 2. And now they are kind of stunned. And I love that during this entire exchange that 6 is just saying, oh, the people watching, we have to keep them entertained. We have to give them something to watch. And after that, we get to see as 6 gets to these doors, pushes them open. It reveals the village. He's in full control. He walks into the laboratory within his mind And it spooks number 2 and 14 enough to actually make them look at the door. But the dream version of number 2 receives the envelope that is supposed to contain the secret information that number 6 was supposedly selling. And in the dream, he opens it, and it's just simply travel brochures. And number 6 says, I did not resign to sell any secrets. And 14's convinced. She, in fact, says that it seems he was actually just trying to go on holiday. Number 2, as we get to see number 6 just lie back on the table in the dream, and it fades to black. Number 2 is absolutely beaten down, just shaken, and that's when his phone starts to ring, and that's the end.
Yeah, it's a bit of an abrupt ending, which I think actually leaves a few questions there. Maybe that's an editing choice there too. Obviously, the stakes are the highest here with Dossier C because, as number 2 and the doctor realizes that they don't really have a, it's a non de plume. You don't know who it is. It's a faceless person or whatever. So here you go from the who done it to more of an existential kind of thing there too. Why are we here? Who am I? All those big mystical questions that people attach religion to at times, and other ways of looking at things here. I'm a free man. I am who I'm creating God's vision. I'm my parents' child. Who I am changes all the time. It's obvious to me that they really tried to go for brokenness. Third one, I think it's very delicate because we're back here at the same party, but even some of the things that get said to him, it seems like there's a little less, not flirtiness, but just more charmingness is out the door here, because we're getting a constant barrage of sounds of dinner music and people stirring around laughing and all of that, and that's been nonstop through all 3 parts of this too. We even had a conga line, I think, in part 2. But the fact that the woman who's the host, again, you can't trust them. You're like, okay, maybe it's her. And it's the idea that the 3 people he would be meeting here are people that he's known in his past, is what we're told of, means that they would appear. So he knew who person A was, okay? Guy with a bad fake mustache, it looks like, okay? Their relationship goes back years. We don't know how or why, but it's heavily implied by watching it. They have perhaps some sort of professional working relationship together, whether it's enemies or friends, and that's what their quick-witted conversation's about. It's like they understand each other, maybe even respect each other, but since they work for different people, their principles are different. In part B, you get to the point where you're going, okay, how are they going to escalate this? And obviously he's not going to give up his information. But then we find the charming, disarming host, the cougar, Miss Engatine. She you can't trust her, and you can't trust the lady, who's a blonde that brings it up too. And again, all this stuff's going on, and it contrasts a lot with what's going on, because he's not trying to like dance with her or do anything. But what's really cool is when this gets in the surreal realm. Try saying that fast. It reminds you of like Eyes Wide Shut, which a lot of people hate because of its pacing and certain things. And I think it's a very metaphorical film. But here, the friend of Agantine that's talking to him, she's like, "Are you sure you want to, do this, take your papers, go on your vacation, because it's a one-way situation. You can't undo what you're doing." And so that's so generically said that it's basically like a confirmation of what's going on, and yet somehow number 2 and number 6 think that's going to be it. But when she takes her earring out and puts it on his hand, you're like, what the fuck is going on here? And you're like, this is some serious spy stuff, because it just looks like it's a pearl or a diamond or something. She says, number 6 appears to be your lucky number. You should play it. So he puts it on a roulette table, because there's gambling going on there. And of course, it hits on 6, even though you should always bet on black. And instead of putting a stack of chips on the ground, he's looking around. He turns and he looks. And it's one of those old, gigantic keys that you always think about as a kid that nobody ever has in real life, that belong in some haunted mansion thing and all that. Cool. And he's like, what am I kind of supposed to do with this? And he walks around and he's not sure, and he talks to Agantine, who has her own key. So they have 2 keys together. and they go to walk out, and they go to walk to the door. So this is she really a part of his subconscious? Is she supposed to represent maybe like his mother or something? I don't really know, but she seems protective of him, that she really likes him. They don't seem like they were lovers. They don't necessarily even seem like they were professional acquaintances, like they work together, but maybe he knows her because of things in the past. You really don't know. And that's the whole thing about this psychedelic journey. And also the big thing too, which I took the screenshot of, is we're getting a lot of these angled shots. I don't know what you call them. I'm not a film school guy, but he kind of makes his way over to this mirror that is kind of crooked, straightens it out. And that's kind of like, are we going through this quote unquote, looking glass? Are we going to the other side? Are we chasing the rabbit? Are we riding the dragon? All these drug and fuel fused dreams that we talk about and how they influence your vision of the world, especially with psychedelics. So people swear that microdosing really takes your brain to an ultimate level, and that's what the government had always been looking for. So we don't know, but when he goes through this door, he seems to almost not be stable anymore, and something goes wrong because number two's like, well, what's wrong? And she's like, oh, he collapsed and they got to revive him. And so they do that with some oxygen stuff, and it just kind of continues. And you're right about the driving thing and all that too. But it seems like Engatine changes her tone with him when she drops him off at this place that he walks into. And it's a really bad set lot. It's used on other famous movies, maybe A Dirty Dozen or something, I heard. But
Well, I think
I
you would
didn't.
too if your event just turned into a key party all of a sudden.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing too. I think this is all metaphorical. This isn't really anything else. He knows what's going on, and we know that he knows it too, and we know that he should be able to resist it. So it might be what we would call lucid dreaming, where in real life, if you eat a lot of carbs or sugars, something like that, and your brain gets overly active when you sleep, and you get dream heavy, there comes a point in your REM cycle that you can almost be consciously aware that you're dreaming and sort of control a little bit and dream in color and fly and all sorts of stuff. And a lot of people like that trippiness part to it of it, because it's, you feel like you're running, you wake up, you feel like you've run, you work out, you wake up feeling energized. It's just, that's the type of performance aspect that the Army and government were working on since at least the early 1900s all around the world. And the fact that they finally had a drug episode in here that is here, and they don't do too much with it other than make it really more metaphorical. I don't think it's a bad thing, and I wonder if we're going to have more of those. But this guy at the end with the mask and all that, we're like, yeah, it's this wussy milk drinking jerk number two guy or whatever who really thinks that he's going to get the information. I'm like, come on. But it's all this double speak about, I want to know who I'm selling out to or not or what. And you're right. Doesn't tell him after he rips the mask off or whatever and comes to. And when the episode ends, it begs a question to me to bring up here as we finish up. Does he even know where he was going when he resigned? Sure, he had pictures of different places like Italy and Greece, and he says to them, yeah, it looks like it was a vacation. He lets them form their own decision and doesn't alter it in any way. So maybe he was on vacation, maybe he was just going to travel and go somewhere, and maybe he didn't really know where he was going to go. We don't know. But 3 episodes in now, I think it's kind of easy to identify with him, because obviously he's representing the ideals we care about with freedom and liberty and being smart and self-sufficient and all those characteristics we value as an adult functional human being. And he's dealing with a very controlled fascist type situation here, and that's how they disguise it. And I just hate number two in here. He's so annoying. He doesn't have the charm or the magnetism of the other ones in terms of how well he portrays himself or the approach. So I'm guessing we're just going to see a lot of number twos here about stuff too. But I don't know. There's a look on number 14's face when she realizes, oh, he was just going on a holiday, that she seems almost slightly pleased with it, even though she's supposedly going to get in trouble. And I'm going, well, nothing happened to her, and we think number two is going to get his ass chewed out if we see him again. We don't know. So I don't know how it ends. But the dream does end with him actually laying down, and then kind of they have the opening sequence again, and then he wakes up and with a smile on his face. I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. But a part of me feels like they're just kind of trolling us a little bit, like they left a lot out, because there's no resolution to the episode. It just simply ends, except with a phone call on the weird red J hook that number two's panicking about and pissing milk in his pants. That's it. I mean, it's an artsy episode. I think it's not an episode about art, but I think it's supposed to be that way. And I think that's one of the interesting points about the show 3 episodes in is they're working on several themes. They present them not only visually with certain things, but the way they talk, and they'll do them at the same time. So there's a lot going on that visually you can watch it if you're listening to it. Plus just the plot, because the plot was really kind of B-level spy stuff. There wasn't anything I think we learned more to hear other than that maybe there's parts on the outskirts of the grounds that they don't have cameras to, or if they do, that was just a poor filming choice there too. But we had knuckle sandwiches, we have fine champagne, we had Parisian parties, we had who done it to where am I to who are you to hey I beat you. So all in all, a very filling episode. I enjoyed it. I do know that in this episode, it reminded me of episode 2, where maybe the order of it might have made more of a difference on how it feels. Because why do we have a number 2? It's really not explained. He's just there. But so what? It's a damn fine episode, if I must say so my damn self. So, any final thoughts from you on The Prisoner season 3 or season 1, episode 3, A, B, and C?
No, I mean, I agree. I think it is actually a really solid episode. I liked the ideas behind it and them being presented with how number 6 is reacting to it, because I was unsure of how they were going to do it. I was kind of unsure if he would ever wake up, if they were just going to go ahead and do it completely in his mind. But one small detail that I love is that before the party, before they send him into his party dream, he has a default thought that always comes into his mind, and it's always going home, packing up right before the gas comes in. And it's just that one moment of the intro over and over. It just really sets it up perfectly, I feel, because that's where we're always carried off to the show again.
Well, the other thought to that too is, as I mentioned to you, that we see the hearse following him and gassing him. So the question is he already dead? Because the idea here is that there's an old expression: you cannot go back home again. Once the bloom is off the rose, you can't unpack it. It's the Pandora's box opening. You can't put everything back inside. It's the loss of innocence. All those kind of things here too. And so far, we've been proven right about not trusting women, about not being able to escape. So I don't know. I mean, there's that element to it as well that maybe gets explored later on in one of these episodes. But be seeing you, well, when do you see somebody in a dream? One of the posters was music begins where speech ends, and all sorts of little things that have to do with being basically like a dream. And hopefully we won't hear dream by the Everly brothers at all in this episode or future episodes. So yeah, there's that perspective that might change how we look at it too. So it's interesting that you mentioned that about wanting to go back home again, because you can't. But it's comforting and it's what you know. And so maybe he realized something that just went against his principles, and that's why he wants to return home, because it's what he knows. He's a stranger in a strange land, as Robert Heinlein would say. But enough of me trying to sound cutesy and smart. Any other final thoughts?
Nope, that's it.
Yeah, hopefully you guys, Ed, Jim, everybody's checking out, plus the new people that have been tweeting about it. I know there's some hardcore fanatics about The Prisoner. It's one of those shows that you can intellectualize and try to over talk a little bit. It's kind of like with you and I went over Twin Peaks episode by episode, all 3 seasons, including the movie. This reminds me a lot like it, but it was also a good 20 plus years earlier too. And it's one of the most earliest shows I think of that has so many things going on at these different levels, which to me make it, one of the greatest TV shows of all time. And looking forward to number 4 so far. Not a dudney episode. All right, guys, that's going to be it for us. For Professor Pixel, myself here, your host Rob on the Xtreme Movie Show, our show tonight, Xtreme TV. We'll continue next week with episode 4. We'll be reviewing that, so spread the word. Let's get a lot of people in here checking that out. We're going to turn off now and then get ready to get set up, hop on over. We're going to be talking about Frequency, coming out in 2000 with Jim Caviezel and Dennis Quaid, about an adult who's able to talk to his father in the past. So it's a time travel movie, aka we're talking more Jim Caviezel, because guess what? We're going to be doing Jim Caviezel Prisoner probably at the end of our season 1 review of The Prisoner. So until then, guys, thanks for listening. Have a good night. Thanks, Ed, for all the kind words in there too, and Jim for showing up, and everybody else there. Be seeing you.
Be seeing you.